In this podcast episode, we're going to get right to the point. I'm going to be answering a email newsletter subscriber question. Um, Today, we're talking about how to find the time and discipline to keep putting out content for social media, for web articles, for YouTube, and for my email newsletter. I know it's a bit of a random or off the beat topic. However, that is literally what one of my readers, Joe, wrote in with when I asked them, well, what do you want to hear about? Well, I do talk a lot about personal development. I find when I reach out asking to hear what people want to talk about, sometimes more often than not, it's more about becoming a content creator and how to build a following or stuff like that. Now, this one, even if you're not interested in being an influencer, I think you should still stick around because fact of the matter is, this is about productivity, time management, willpower, discipline, all very cornerstone, keystone habits that are necessary if you want to succeed in this world, if you want to compound your results in life. And even if you don't think you're good at it yet, just realize that with time, like any skill or any muscle, the more you consistently train it, the better you do. And I think the right systems in place really help doing that. If you have the wrong advice or you're doing the wrong things, you're not going to get there, or you're going to get there a lot slower. I was just at the gym a couple hours before this, and this one dude, you just tell by how he was behaving in the gym, his body language, his facial expressions. You could tell he was, I hate to say it, but kind of a loser. He, you could tell he didn't have confidence, and he didn't know what to do at the gym. But he was blundering around like he did and being kind of belligerent about it, taking up machines, and he was doing like one set of every exercise. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to get much of a stimulus doing one set and then just bouncing around. But, this guy looked like he was in his 30s and just didn't have a clear game plan. And it reminded me of other areas in life where I didn't have that, or I still don't have that. Like I'm looking into my nutrition, and I'm realizing that's how I behave when I'm in a grocery store. I go in there and I don't have a game plan on what to order and buy. So I end up with walking out with a crap load of random foods, oftentimes a lot of junk food as well, though I try and limit that so it's not that much, but it's just random. And therefore, it can't be made into any healthy meals, or really there's no plan, and thus my nutrition is not the best. So I bring that up because this all leads into how I'm going to answer this question. So let me read this whole question first, and then we'll go from there. I'm curious to hear about how you find the time and discipline to keep pushing out emails and videos. Maybe you've already written about this somewhere. I have a small blog myself and find it hard to find the motivation to keep writing. Even when I do sit down to write, I write very slowly, taking weeks to get out a short article. I guess it could be generalized to procrastinating on big projects in general, like cleaning the house, patching holes in the wall. Physical or mental challenges like learning chess, Go, poker memory competitions would be interesting as well, although I would understand if that's not the type of content you want your brand to be about. Doesn't have to be a video, a written progress report type article would be interesting. So maybe we'll talk about some chess stuff later on, but let me touch on the first question here and go from there. So first off, when you're comparing yourself to me, you got to realize I've been haphazardly trying to figure it out on my own and writing articles, making videos, writing to my exclusive email newsletter, which y'all should join at dreamlifelab.org/newsletter, for almost 9 years. I think I really got serious with it around 2015, 2016, and maybe 2017 was really where I started to really have a consistent-ish schedule. And I think I tested a lot of things. I think a few things stuck. So the one principle that I apply to fitness and writing and everything, that I have found to work is this thing that I think later on books were written about, like Atomic Habits. There's a section on basically the same idea, and I believe Dr. BJ Fogg has written about it for a while too with his blog Tiny Habits. But the simple one sentence explanation of it is, rather than take on something massive, you do something so small that it's so easy to do that you can't help but not do it. And then you do that on a consistent basis, preferably at least once a day. And through that, you rewire your neurons in your brain and you build a habit. Once you've established this habit of doing this, because some movement's always better than none, then you slowly, gradually add a bit more intensity or duration, and build from there. I think the ways people screw that up is they don't follow that, and then one of those days, or all of them, or most of them, they just take on this huge task. Like if you're trying to write a blog post, and you have this in your head, all these preconceived expectations of, oh, it has to be 10,000 words, it has to be flawless, it has to be perfect. That is going to intimidate you so much that you don't even start. Okay, so we've covered that. Now, what about writer's block? What about you writing slowly? What about it taking weeks to get out just a short article? I think I definitely did a few challenges back in those days. You can go to my blog and go back in the archives to see my old articles. They weren't as good and they were short. But I think one challenge that may help you is try out just kind of letting go of your expectations of how long your article has to be, how much you have to write, and just do some type of daily challenge. In fact, I actually did a 5-day challenge for you, Joe, on my blog as well. It's called the 5-Day Overcome Procrastination Challenge. I posted one blog post per day for you just to kind of illustrate how I would go about it if I had to start again. And one of those days, I intentionally made the article really short just to show you that, like, it's okay to put it out there. Nothing's really going to go wrong. In fact, you're not going to get any comments, good or bad. It's probably not going to get much reach, and that's okay. You're building a habit. You're building practice. You're getting your steps in rather than doing nothing. So write a little bit each day. It doesn't have to be a full page or a full article. And whether you put it out or not, I mean, I'll leave that up to you. I personally find putting it out helps build that momentum. And that's a key word. You need to build momentum. If you're not starting, if you're not doing it every day, you're stalling that momentum. Every other day is still like better than nothing. I would say you can still arguably build some momentum that way. I think one challenge I did back in those older days was just posting anything. It can be short, it could be long, it could be medium size, but just on a topic I found interesting. And trust me, there's always something to write about. And one way to prove that is if you try to meditate, which is really just clearing your mind of all thoughts. And then if a thought comes in, you clear it again, and you're mindful of that. You don't beat yourself up if thoughts keep coming in, but that's just the exercise you do for mental clarity and focus and stuff. And when you meditate, as many beginners do, you'll find that, wow, I have a lot of thoughts. I didn't realize how much my mind thinks, but it thinks a lot. And all sorts of really random thoughts will come in, like, oh man, I didn't like that movie, but I like this movie better. Or, man, I really wish I could see this. Or, that movie coming up is really nice. Or yada, yada. And you're like, where are all these thoughts coming from? And you really realize that you have no control of your mind. But through my practice of meditation, I also learned, wow, we all have all these interesting thoughts, ideas all the time. We just don't notice them. And so meditation helped me realize that. And so most beginners, when they start meditation, they experience something similar. And so that's one way to prove that you probably have ideas. And it doesn't have to be some grandiose, amazing thing. You can write about something simple, such as I remember one day I did like back in like 2016, 17, I did like it may have also been a 5-day challenge or a 3-day challenge, but it was called the Less Things, No Clutter Challenge. And you can actually still search it up in the archives. It's all on my archives on my blog, dreamlifelab.org. Yeah, by the way, my old site domain is willyoulaugh.com. We recently did a rebrand. So if you're wondering, wait, wasn't your site something else? We did a rebrand. But check it out. And I think the whole topic of it was something simple. It was interesting to me, but it didn't have to be this grand idea. It was just like, how can I do less and declutter my life and be happier? I think it was the Less Things, More Happiness challenge or something like that. And every day I would just do one small activity to see if I can improve that thought and idea. And then I would journal about my results and my experience with it. I think one day, and this was back in the days where I lived with my parents to save money, even though I was an adult, which I'm actually pretty proud about. I'm not ashamed about that. I think I saved a lot of money. And I'm not the only one to do that. John E. Finance, who's a big personal finance TikToker, he does that a lot too. So, as you can tell, I have ideas. So one day I blogged about just living at home and how that felt. And then the other day I blogged about how after dinner with my family, I just went on a nice, peaceful, short, slightly boring walk around the neighborhood and how I felt and how that was kind of peaceful and calming for me. And it still kind of led to more happiness without me having to spend more money or clutter my life with objects. So there's always something to talk about, and it doesn't have to be this epic long article. I've experimented with those articles too, but you don't have to do all that. Same thing with the videos and emails I put out. I think part of that system is sometimes just lowering the bar, and that bar of expectation on how high quality it has to be or how amazing it has to be. Some people would debate that. Some people would say, well, you need to commit to this level of excellence, and that's how you're going to get views and attention and so forth. And there's this grain of truth to that. But if you're someone like Joe who's just starting out and he's not even getting going because he's not finding a motivation to even start or be consistent, then I would argue that's not the time and place for it. I would also encourage, and maybe this is a cliche, but I mean, you can't neglect this. I would encourage finding topics that you're passionate about. Maybe that's obvious to some, maybe it's not, but frankly speaking, a lot of people burn out or don't even start because they write a blog or make a video on stuff that they don't really like that much, or they thought they would but they don't, or they thought they would make money from it but they don't like the topic. So I'm sure there's something in this vast world of amazingness, maybe you haven't found it, maybe you already have, that you find interesting, and write a little bit about that. And if you can find something like that, it's not really as much work as you think. And trust me, the more you go out and experience the world and look for interesting, bizarre topics, you'll find something. And so I encourage that if you don't feel like you found your passion and whatnot yet. And so if you find those things, the motivation you need is not as necessary, because you don't need the motivation or discipline. I mean, people usually don't say, I need more motivation to play video games. It's like, it just comes natural because they enjoy it. So for me right now, I think I found a couple interesting new things I'm liking a lot. One is travel photography and kind of editing those photos in Lightroom to look really good, and then like what camera or lens to use. That was something I wasn't really into like a few years ago because it just seemed so complicated. But maybe it's because I've matured and like I can wrap my head around it, or um, I travel more. That's probably part of it. But now I like a lot of that, and so I talk about it occasionally in my newsletter and so forth, and it comes easy. And there's all sorts of other random stuff. Jiu-jitsu. I'm also trying a new workout and nutrition routine, and hired a life coach, or not life coach, a real coach to help me with that. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff that I can talk about that make it easy. Now, don't believe those people who say all you have to do is find your passion and you're good to go, because um, no matter what you do, you will still need some level of willpower or discipline to do the things you don't want to do. You're still gonna feel some days where you're like, yeah, I like talking about productivity, but I don't want to do it today. I've done it all these days before. And those are days where you have to push through. Science has shown that willpower is one of the highest correlated skills with success, income, and career and status later in life. And willpower, as Mike Tyson puts it in an interview I recently saw of him, is basically it's doing things you don't want to do like you really love doing it. And that's a trained skill, that is a muscle. And if you read the book Willpower by Roy Baumeister, it covers a lot of science to prove that. So I think there's many exercises you can do to improve your willpower. I think on a general level, the book recommends just finding one activity that requires willpower and then doing it every day. So maybe that's like push-ups or ice baths or something like that. And through that, you're training your muscle, which you can apply to other means. Or you can just choose writing articles or making videos as your willpower building thing, and then work on that. I think, like I said, most people blow themselves out because they say, oh yeah, I'll use this tiny habits approach. Then they begin, and then when they actually track your results, which I also recommend, track it, write it down on a piece of paper or on your phone somehow, and look back, the results are not always as clean. It's like, oh yeah, I did this one day, and then the other day I did an hour's worth when I should have just done 10 minutes of writing, and now I'm burnt out from that. So you got to follow the process and trust the process. Now, what about your question about procrastinating on big projects, cleaning the house, patching holes in the wall? I think all I've said so far applies to that. Another thing I would add is prioritization. So you notice that a lot of productivity experts, as well as like successful business people or such successful people, they have a priority list of all their tasks. And what they usually do is of all the things that they can do, that's usually a list that's more than 10 things long. However, there's probably like a top 3 or less of things that, like, if you did nothing else but you accomplished these 3 things, the day will be a success. But if you don't do those things, then you're really passing away your life, or you're missing chances that could change your life, or it could really affect your life badly. So I prioritize in that way every day, every week, every month. And sometimes it just takes a mental note. But if you're starting out, I used to do a lot of writing and journaling, or I would type it out at the start of the day. There's even Chrome extensions. I think there's one called Focus I used to use that to create a tab and ask you that question so you could type it in before your day starts. So I would do all that stuff. I think at one point I used a whiteboard, but it really kind of helps you clarify those priorities. So let's say I had to clean the house, do my laundry, patch a hole in the wall. get a haircut because that's overdue, hit the gym, and I also had to do something important, which was keep taking this video course I took that's going to change my life because it's going to help me drastically improve my YouTube videos, which could potentially lead to massive upside in terms of income. I'm going to put that last one on top because it has the most impact, and not doing it could really change the course of my life by just keeping me in my place. So I'm going to do that first, and then maybe one or two of those other things. And then for those kind of low cost errands, like getting a haircut, which I could always do tomorrow, and it wouldn't really change the world or wreck the world. I can defer those and I would still feel comfortable. Now, what I also tend to do once you've built that consistency of completing those top three is if you still have energy reserves, and I feel like, as you get better at this over time and build your willpower and energy levels through good nutrition, sleep, exercise, and just building your willpower muscle, then you can start to chip away at a couple of those errands, and you feel good about that because you're accomplishing these errands too, and you still have energy reserves left to do that. So yeah, I think these are good mental models you should use that I've actually used in my own life. I mean, that's how I deferred getting a haircut, but I literally just got a haircut yesterday in that kind of priority sequence. I think I deferred it for a few days because I had some other more important tasks to get to. I think if you're someone who forgets these things, but they're important enough that you shouldn't forget them, document them somewhere. Nowadays, there's so many tools to make it so easy to document. You could put it in notes in your phone or Evernote or Notion. And there's a lot of tools like voice to text, so you don't even have to type it in. So there's all sorts of ways of doing that easier so you don't forget those errands. And just chip away at it. Some people, they like to take a big crack at something. Maybe there's 5 holes in your wall, and they're the type of people who, when they do the project, they want to do the whole thing in one fell swoop. I'm not going to say that's not possible. I mean, it goes against that whole tiny habits approach, but for some people, they prefer that. If you can do it, great. But if you're running into roadblocks where you don't ever get started and you procrastinate for months or years, then maybe try a different approach. You have to test out and experiment with different things if you're going years without getting results. So, obviously different personalities have different tastes and preferences, but if something's not working, you got to pivot off of that and maybe try a thing where you patch one hole and then you move on. Now, if you read books like The Power of Habit, you'll know that scientifically how habits work is there's a cue, a trigger of some sort, a action that's taken, and then a reward. And through that cycle, you get a flywheel effect where that habit gets cemented. So some people like to kind of punish themselves if they don't do a habit. I think that's backwards. That's definitely one way, but I like positive reinforcement rather than negative. I think there's even a tool out there that I wouldn't recommend, but apparently there's something called Pavlov, where you can buy like a wristband that shocks you if you don't do something you said you would. You press a button and it shocks you. I mean, it could help. Another approach is the Tim Ferriss approach, which is you commit to donating to like a charity that you despise, like the Hitler support group or something, if you don't do something. That's another negative reinforcement thing that could help you. I think some people will do like, hey, if you don't approach that woman, you owe me $100 cash. That's a way of doing it, for sure. I mean, it kind of sets that precedence. So I wouldn't rule it out. But I do like positive reinforcement. So, some things when you do it naturally already are a reward itself. So, I mean, for haircuts, a lot of guys, myself included, we look in the mirror, we're like, wow, now I look good, I feel good. And that's a reward in it of itself from the haircut. But sometimes for other tasks, there really is no built-in reward afterwards for doing it. So you have to build that in to really set your system properly and that reptilian part of your brain to start to acknowledge and build that reward. So an example would be something like I accomplished a big certification that was really difficult, but I passed it recently, a certification exam for a data viz tool called Tableau. It's basically like a technical skill tool that's going to be useful for my career. Now, there's really no built-in reward from that after I complete that, because you get a nice electronic certificate. That's about it. And then maybe if you tell your friends or family or your manager, like I did, you may get some cheers and excitement and applause, and that's helpful. That's a little bit of positive praise. But usually that's not enough to really cement it into your system and really reward yourself for it. So I think what I did after that was I bought myself just some experiences, some items, like $20, $30 worth, that really kind of rewarded myself. So you get the point. I'm not going to ramble too much about that, but that will help you kind of get going on these big projects. Now, another way you could do it is just farm it out. If one is successful enough in certain areas in life, they earn enough, and this is something that I've more so learned about. I don't do it myself because I'm not at that level of income, but because they're so successful in one area of building a business, for example, they're able to outsource the rest. They can pay someone to clean the house, pay someone to fix the car, patch the homes for them, and because their dollar per hour earning output is just so high in that one career thing, they can outsource the rest of their life. They can get someone to edit the videos, make the thumbnail, and so forth. You may or may not be at that level yet, but I mean, some of those things aren't as expensive as you think. I heard that the whole get someone to do your laundry and clean it and fold it for you, it's like something like $1 or $2 a pound. Don't quote me on that, but that's not like billionaire status level. It's like, okay, if you have a 10-pound, okay, no one has that much, but a 5-pound bag of laundry, that can't be right. $10 for a whole bag. Maybe it's like $5 per pound, but that's still like $25. It's not going to bankrupt you, is what I'm saying. So that's another method. Now there's trade-offs to that because you're not really ever building that muscle of discipline. You're just kind of running away from it and then throwing money at it, which has its own issues, because if you rely on that too much, then you start to neglect areas you shouldn't in life, like, family or your relationships or whatnot. But that's a topic for another day. So, just bring it back to Joe here. I think you got to work on a system of discipline using a tiny habits, otherwise known as atomic habits framework, and build from there. Start small. Maybe it's just one article, 500 words or less every other day, and just go from there. Maybe it's once a week. Maybe it's one video. And the better you get at it, the more you can tack on to it. I wouldn't recommend doing it all at once. I mean, while I have put out thousands of videos and articles and so forth, I mean, that's over a 9-10 year span. I mean, I maybe started 2015, so maybe 8-year span. And back then, my bar to entry was low. I was putting out very unedited, crappy videos where I was just filming to the camera. And those videos kind of sucked. They did suck, which is why they didn't get views. But at least I was building momentum. I was learning how to speak on camera, be more confident, say less ums and ahs, and still build some skills. And then, if anything, I built off of that and eventually started to move on to editing my videos more, adding thumbnails. And then when I got more comfortable with that cadence, I added on a little by little, maybe some articles and then email marketing and so forth. So you don't really have to take on all of that at once. Not at all. I mean, thousands of content pieces seems like a lot from afar, but when you average that out over like 8 years, I mean, there's like 365 days a year. It's really not that much. Maybe it's a couple times a week. I know I didn't do it every day. So yeah, hopefully those tips helped, Joe, and hopefully they'll get you started on making articles, videos, emails, and cleaning your house and doing all that stuff. I would say just get started, and usually you'll find that you can do more than you thought if you just set a goal to do a little bit. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I'll clean this small part of the house, and you're like, wow, that wasn't as bad as I thought. I'll clean a bit more. And yeah, don't take on too much too quickly. You'll burn yourself out once you establish that habit. Build from there. As far as your final question about any possible physical or mental challenges that you want me to do that would be entertaining, like learning chess, Go, poker, memory competitions. I mean, I technically know how to play all those games, and I lightly follow chess and still play chess on occasion, and all those things. Um, I think if I were to do that, it'd be have to be something I was really into. Most of those things I dabble in, so it's more just like here and there. I think anyone who's any good at any of those things, they're almost obsessed with them because they're so interested in them. So that's really the only reason I wouldn't go deep into those things. I'm not as fascinated in chess as anyone else. Um, Nor do I think there's much payoff to like really dedicating myself to it. To go from, I don't know, a 500 elo to 1,000 elo, which would probably be a lot of effort for me. So I'll think about it. Maybe I'll do a challenge here and there if I find something worth doing. There are challenges I have done, like to your point, I've probably created content that you're unaware of on some platform. For example, I think about a month and a half ago, just on my Instagram Reels, I did a no lying challenge for a week where I just kind of was inspired by some of the ideals that were put out by Jordan Peterson's book on the power of telling the truth and how it will stand out. And there's a few other books like Mate by Tucker Max that talked about how that was the better approach anyways. So I did this experiment. So check that out. I have done challenges before. It's a little bit old now, but I'll probably take the stuff from there and put it on YouTube eventually. But I did do a no lying challenge, and then like every other day I would post my results from that and where it was difficult not to lie and how that was. Yeah, spoiler alert. Well, I won't spoil the whole thing, but I think part of what I found was that people thought I wouldn't be able to finish it, but I was, and it was because like that's kind of already kind of how I live my life and my values anyways. So there's that. And also I learned some also really interesting things. So you'll have to check that out to see what it is about. But yeah, maybe I'll do another challenge here or there or whatnot. So if you have any other ideas or requests for topics you want me to cover or challenges you want me to do, anyone listening to this, go ahead and check me out at dreamlifelab.org. You can reach out by joining my email newsletter and responding to any of my emails. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next podcast episode.